Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Leader in You podcast. My name is Polina. I'm so excited to be here. Remember, this is brought to you by EMC Leaders, and I co host this podcast with the amazing Dr. Lola Gershfeld. Welcome, Dr. Lola.
Hello, Polina. Hello, everyone. It is so good to be here with you. Thank you for joining us.
Yay! So, we're pretty much at the start of summer, which is getting hotter everywhere, at least on the West Coast and also the East Coast, right?
Florida, it's very nice. It's very nice, 85 degrees. So,
Yes.
beautiful weather. The ocean is so calm and just lovely.
Yes. Well, actually, this time also we tend to see a lot of turnover in companies and how there seems to be this, increase in onboarding new employees and onboarding new team members. So it's perfect time to talk about how incredible it would be to incorporate the EMC process into an onboarding system for new team members and new employees across your company. So that's what we're going to be discussing today, and just perfectly in time of the almost start of the new season of summer. So we actually have a great story that we want to share that has to do with this topic, which is how we kind of came up with this, like, oh, this is such a good idea. Because probably so many times people wait to deal with conflicts in teams until there's actually a conflict. But this is like the preventative care that needs to happen. It's like the preventative medicine that you take to make sure that you stay healthy all year long. This is just like that, but on a whole different level. It's the preventative mental health care that we can take to make sure that our team members and our new employees in the onboarding process feel safe and secure already in the workplace. So, tell us the story, Dr. Lola. You had a fantastic story about this exact thing.
Well, I want to tell you what a fantastic way to help the culture, right? Because as a manager, as the trainer, your job and your goal is to create a positive environment for people to where they can thrive, they can collaborate, they can engage. And when you do have new people come in, what often happens is that there's a lot of disconnection happens at the beginning, because with the person, they go through the onboarding training and they hear one thing, but when they start working with the team or with a manager, they hear different things, right? They actually hear like, oh, this is not how the company works, and you should stay away from this person, and let me tell you about that person who is causing this issue. So I remember years ago, I was working at this company, and we had a new CEO hired. And for the first 2 weeks, everybody wanted to talk to this new CEO. He made everybody feel safe and comfortable, but they were complaining and criticizing and judging. And for the next 2 weeks, the only thing he heard is how everybody is not working and how they're not taking accountability and how they're not following through the project. So I remember he got everybody together and he said, look, I've been listening to you for the last 2 weeks. And I want to tell you, please do not complain anymore. Let's just get to work. And that was obviously he didn't have the right tools to get people, in the right place of mind and reconnected. But this is what happens when new people join the team. They, on one hand, they kind of get into the negative cycle and they become part of that negative cycle. On another hand, they can actually help the team to regain the balance, because if you teach a new person the EMC process, they are much more willing to take risks and to do things because they don't have relationship injuries yet with anybody. So they are much more courageous and much more in balance to actually do the process.
So let me just if I understand correctly, so what was happening was when they did the onboarding for the new CEO, correct? Like everybody was complaining because they felt safe to complain to him as though he was like, they were looking for him to solve their problems, right? Like, these are all the issues that are going on in the company. This person's doing this. Like, they're kind of giving him like a recap of the last, so however many years or months or whatever they've been working there, and their experiences that were not resolved and, dealt with. And so they were kind of like unloading on him so that he knew what was the drama in the company.
Exactly. So in a way, they are pulling him into the negative cycle.
Yes. But yeah, I totally get that. And I think that happens in all relationships inside of work. Like, even when a new coworker comes, right? Let's say you have a new team member that comes, and then you become close with that, or maybe you're on that same team and you click, and then now they're kind of spilling all the things that, are going on or have gone on, or what's going on with them in the company. And so it's very common to do that, because the way that they're expressing themselves are using those negative, ineffective ways, by complaining and criticizing and judging and blaming, which we point out in the form when we work through conflicts. And so this is what they're doing. They feel safe enough to express themselves. They're just expressing themselves ineffectively. So it's like he becomes part of, like you said, the negative cycle that's already taking place in the company. And at the same time, this is the beautiful thing about this process. He can choose, if he had the tools, if we put in a CEO that has the tools, he would no longer become part of the negative cycle in that moment. It's the way that he's responding or dealing with the situation, the tools that he has, that determines whether he becomes part of the negative cycle or not. So this is the point, right? So just because they're complaining and judging and blaming and kind of giving him the update of the situation at the work doesn't necessarily mean that he's in, like, it's them trying to, bring them into the negative cycle. It's the person who's come on as a CEO or a new team member or a new employee, whatever that job or that role is, they get to decide with the tools that they have. If they don't have the tools, they don't really have a decision, right? They get sucked into it because that's the same thing they know, right? They're like, yeah, oh my God, now we're going to start making the judgments based off what these people tell me, and who do I like more, and who's in higher rank, and what are they telling me? So who has more merit to tell us what is going on in the company, and who should I believe? So this is what happens. This is why we are trying to show the importance, how incredibly important it would be for anyone onboarding to a new company to learn the EMC process, to understand the effective communication tools, recognition, awareness, identification, expression, all of that thing, that all validation, all the things that we talk about in the form, to be able to handle any situation that comes at them when they join. Now, something you said that was really important that I want to point out. In the 2 weeks that he experienced it, by the end of the 2 weeks, because he doesn't have these tools, right? He did end up getting caught in the negative cycle, because he said, like, okay, enough already. I've been hearing all your complaints. And so he pretty much was exhausted, tired, probably overwhelmed, annoyed, irritated, frustrated, all those surface emotions, like surprise probably when he came to the company. So he's like, okay, that's it. I want to stop you. Like, it's enough is enough, as opposed to validating from the very beginning. Had he walked in and started with the process, knew how to communicate, knew how to use the phrases, I hear you, I get how difficult it is. Okay, let's actually understand everyone's cycle. Let's understand the cycle of the company. Let's understand each relationship cycle. Let's understand what are the patterns so we can change those patterns. And then let's work on all those relationships within the 2 weeks that he was there. He would have probably decreased the conflicts by 70 to 80% in the 2 weeks that he was there, had he known, right? Because it starts with the CEO, right? It starts at the top of the company, and then it kind of has this trickle down effect, even though the effects of it probably would have been seen in the next 3 to 6 months. But the first 2 weeks of arriving there could have made a really profound impact on the team. And instead, because he didn't have the tools, which I can't reiterate this enough, doesn't mean that it's anyone's fault or they're a bad person or, they are less or not knowing. It's just that we're not taught this process, not until now. Well, we have process to actually learn, right? So if he knew, it would have been much more effective but he didn't know, which is very common. And he got sucked right into the drama that was going on in the company, the cycle that was happening already.
Yeah, 100%. And you said it absolutely correct. He was exhausted. He felt that it was a waste of time, and he called everybody little children. Because he said, this is work, and we're here to do work. We're not here to blame each other, to bicker with each other. So basically, for 2 weeks, people vented, and then they were shut down. Yeah. And so what happened actually is they became relieved, so to speak, for a few weeks. And then all of that negative cycle started to erode and actually created more drama and more ineffective ways people dealt with it. So it was very, very difficult for the CEO to manage that drama. And but he had onboarding. He had onboarding how to enter sales order, how to read financial statements, how to talk to the to the technical department. What does the manufacturing process looks like? What are the ISO 9000? So he had onboarding, except one very important component is relationships and how to deal with, how to recognize these patterns and how to fix the pattern instead of shutting people down.
This is really interesting because I think that a lot of what happens in the dynamics of a corporate office and a corporate job is that people, based on rank in relation to conflict, they will communicate in a certain way because of the rank they hold in the company. And so I think that something that something that this process could really impact in the onboarding is being able to feel as important across every single level of the company, regardless of your position, right? And a lot of times that's such a big missing piece in corporations, because a lot of times if you're just like the person who distributes the mail or the assistant, or administrative, they're oftentimes felt a lot less important than, some of the top people in the company. But they could have different skills, of course, and they have different qualifications in the company. But incorporating this kind of process at such an early stage when you're onboarding someone could really help them thrive and move up in the company a lot faster when they do feel as important. Like, oh, I am an important integrated part of this company because what I have to say and how I feel matters. And I think just like you said, the CEO came in, everyone was so excited because they're like, wow, we have someone new. He's going to fix everything. It's going to be better. And then in 2 weeks to get completely shut down. And then also to have those kinds of demeaning comments. It's like, of course, now they are like, oh, this again, probably, right? Like, oh, we're going to have more of this. Nothing's changed. It's kind of the same. It's not going to really make a difference that we want to make.
Exactly. And we sort of have this expectation that if we hire a new CEO, suddenly with the new eyes, they will magically change the culture of the company. They're going to magically change people's behavior. and they're going to get everyone on board and doing the right things, right, magically. And
Yes.
unfortunately, even new CEOs or incoming new people, whether it is a CEO or, like you said, an assistant or a manager, if you are not equipped with the right tools, you are going to unfortunately get stuck in that same negative cycle and interactions that going on in the company. So I agree with you. And so I want to go into what people can do in terms of the onboarding and how can they create a way to help people to use the process um, successfully, so they are part of the solution rather than part of the somebody who wants to help but have no idea how to help.
Yes. Yeah. Wonderful. So this is great. And I think the first step is for them to all sign up for your course.
Well, I think that the role of the trainer is very important, right? That the role of the trainer is not to judge people or not to try to pathologize, what's happening in the company, but actually understand, like the trainers and the managers play a big role, like a role model on how they
Mhm.
address situations. So without taking sides or without trying to look at the behavior or certain part of the behavior and try to somehow saying, well, this person is so difficult, they are demonstrating the empathy, the relentless empathy that we need when people are being stuck in the negative cycle and respond to the disconnections that they're experiencing. So even though the CEO did not have the tools, at the beginning he was empathic, validating, but at the end he was getting exhausted because he didn't know what to do with this information. So
Yeah.
when you have an onboarding, when you use this process, you can incorporate it to really demonstrate like how difficult it can be for new peoples to hear that, and when they can recognize the pattern, as you said, very, very important. You can start changing and restructure the pattern rather than changing people's behavior.
And I think too that that is such an important role to have, especially if you're a CEO or you are a manager or you are a trainer. You want to be able to understand why people react the way they do, which is what the EMC process teaches us, how emotions influence behaviors, how to approach difficult situations or interactions constructively so people feel heard and validated and seen, how to build trust intentionally. So like all of these factors they learn in the EMC process. They learn to understand, how can we make an environment that allows new employees to feel included, to feel validated, to feel important, to feel seen, as opposed to what typically happens where the new employees feel judged, excluded, afraid to make mistakes, and they're feeling constantly like they're unsure of their environment, and whether it's going to be whether they're doing a good enough job. That I think that also plays a lot in the heads of new employees and onboarding new team members is, am I good enough for this position? Will I be able to keep the position? Will I be able to will I be able to make my team proud or the manager proud? So I think that in addition to preventing more tension, right? So it's like you can learn how to recognize disconnections, become aware of the cycle, just like you said, staying curious and having those conversations with people like, okay, let's see, can I keep my own balance and then help other people support their balance as well? So,
Yes, absolutely. And for that, you need a map. You definitely need a roadmap. And I recently listened to a podcast talking about the emotional connection process. And this person used the concept I like, the courtyard concept. And what it's basically, it's like a deliberate, predictable, and safe space set by a trainer, by a manager, that allows people to experience what does it even feel like to talk about maybe an uncomfortable experience or somebody like where you got hurt. And what I liked about this is that in when people experience this, that it's okay to talk about their like hurt feelings, and there's actually a roadmap, a way to organize that experience, articulate it, and express it, they start to feel comfortable and empowered by knowing how to deal with it when things like that come up. I think you mentioned with your new team member that joined your team. What was interesting is that when there was a disconnect in your team, this person actually called it out and said, "Let's do this process. Let's get out our forms and come together and talk about it." Because that person, first of all, did not have any injuries yet. That within the team, they had a lot of courage and strength. They were a lot more in balance, so they can actually facilitate the conversation where when people already worked in a team for some time and they have some injuries, they would maybe feel a lot more hesitant or scared to talk about it. But when you have a facilitator who is leading the conversation, it is a lot safer.
Definitely. Actually, it was interesting when we did onboard this new team member, probably within the first 2 weeks, we'd already done our first session with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I had a session recently with a guy who is a firefighter, and he was sharing very similar experience where, I mean, he's been a firefighter for a while now, but has a conflict with another team member. And this firefighter recently got promoted. And so it was between him and a team member, a newer team member. And so they had a very similar conflict. And it was just in the basics of like the new team member was acting like everything was fine with him and, this guy that I had a session with. But then like behind his back, he would go to the chief of the fire department and say how he should have gotten the job,
Mm-hmm.
And the guy that I had a session with, he said that he felt so like uncomfortable, and it was so difficult for him to know even what to do. Like, he's been working at the station for a long time, and it was very, very difficult. Even having the session he was actually really good with going through each of the sections of the form and communicating to me, which helped him feel much more relieved and free. But it was his first time ever communicating his feelings that way. So, and he said, like, had he known or have this process available in the station, they could be having these kinds of conversations that could ease a lot of the tension. And he said, even in the industry where you're like a firefighter, you have to think quick in situations to keep people safe, right? If you're distracted or off balance emotionally, then it's much more difficult for you to know how to respond in moments of really high intense stress. You lose access to the parts of the brain. And he said that in the session, how he felt like, well, now like he's really stressed about this whole situation. And now it's like, I already have stress with the job of how to make sure that I'm making the right decisions. Now I'm stressed with, am I making the right decisions as an employee at the station with my peers, with my team members? So
yeah, it can be very heavy. Exactly. And the brain, like you said, the brain needs to be focused on the job, and the breakup in the relationship takes that focus away from the job. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And one of my favorite quotes about you, aside from the fish out of the water, because I say that a lot, like throughout the day, like even we had another situation with two other team members that they're remote. They don't live here. And so something happened. We had a bit of a conflict yesterday. And I said to the girl that, the team member that I work with here, I said to her, they're like fish out of water. They're just acting weird. And it makes sense for them to act weird, But one of the other quotes that you say that I really like is, people don't become part of a culture by learning the rules. They become of a culture by learning how to connect with
Yes,
people,
exactly.
right? And
Exactly.
I like to say connection over correction. Connect and understand that relationship is much more at the priority at the top than before you have to correct an action or you correct a conflict or situation that could be throwing people off balance.
100%. Because once you connect, you see options. Once you
Yes.
connect, you're much more open to recognize and understand what the other person is telling you and sharing. Once you connect, you accept your own experience and the other person's. So I feel like once you connect, it like frees you up and to be the person that you want to be and the person that the other people are looking for, right?
Yeah.
Because when we are disconnect, we lose that. We lose that sense of self and we lose the sense of being with other people.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this was so lovely. And I feel like we could continue to talk about the onboarding process and the importance of using the EMC process to onboard new team members for hours and hours, because there are so many important things that we need to learn before we come into a company and make an impact. And we want to make a positive impact so we create a thriving environment so that everyone that works with us and around us becomes closer to being themselves and the greatest version possible. So, thank you very much for listening. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. This is the Leader in You podcast brought to you by EMC Leaders. Anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to say that the EMC process actually provides this essential resource for trainers and managers and owners of the companies to navigate the complexities that happen in relationships when people work together. So when they have this tool in their toolbox, it's actually, I was talking to somebody and I said the most important thing that trainers learn is how to use the attachment lens, right? So when they look at the problem, when they look at the situation, the first thing they do is put on these attachment glasses on, and now they can see, it's like you can see the world differently, right? You can see what the situation, like you said, wow, they just fish out of water, they're struggling. That's a new way of looking at the situation, and you, and that you're shifting the perspective, and you're also creating more safety and connection with other people. So that is a key to create for trainers, to transform their relationship, transform the culture, and shift people into that way of thinking. Yeah.
That's beautifully said. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And we love being here and we appreciate your desire and your continued creative expressions on your feelings and the drive for you to become better in expressing yourself. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.